Hello. So, Caesar says, "Hi David, are you able to point to the video about layers of thought you mentioned?" Thank you. So, I mentioned, I think I mentioned that I made this video, or mentioned in the other video, about layers of thought. And I think, Caesar, you're asking me to give you the link to the video, but what I'll do is I'll just make another video about it. So I think it's important to my earlier videos. There wasn't as much clarity here as the more recent ones. Like I say frequently, there were waves of delusion that came and went, and you know, if there still are, I'm not aware of it probably. So, but it's clearer now. But all my old videos, I've never changed or removed one of them. But I think it's important to remember that when we're talking about layers of thought, is ultimately there aren't layers of thought. There's only one thought that says there are layers of thought, right? So it's important to keep in mind that what I'm doing is, in this pointing, is giving a conceptual descriptive model based off of my own experience that is there to, in a resonant way, point to something in your experience. So, pardon me, so if something clarifies in your experience, like layers of thought falling away and revealing a deeper, more fundamental level or layer of thought, or more primary, subtle thought, then perfect, that's your experience. But don't go and look for something called layers of thought. That's not going to work. I could be wrong, but I really get the feeling that's not going to work. Because it's very easy in this to I'm not saying you're doing this, by the way, I'm just pointing this out because I believe it's important. It's very easy to take anything I say and then assimilate a mental model of that, a conceptual model of that, and then project the idea of that out into experience, or into experience, to something that we are going to look for. And the same goes for everything you hear on this, which is why I constantly reiterate that this is simple. This is about slowing down and stopping, not about looking from that subjective position for a new experience, a new objective experience. That's the important thing here. But to give a model of what I mean, and hold it lightly by the layers of thought, is that what I noticed initially I noticed, before I noticed, I wasn't aware of my thought. Thought would run when I was fully identified with it. That was just what was happening. That was just me relating to reality. As soon as I started to notice the thoughts, already there's a separation there. Again, to point back to another video, my very first video on here, I remember saying something like, this, people call this the watcher state, created a bit of distance between the thought and me. It created a bit of space there. It's the very first step in this, is to be aware that you're thinking. In that, so to speak, you, the subject, separates from the objective thought narrative, so that it's not fully wrapped up, fully identified with it. So you could say that's a layer of thought. Then we've got what I noticed was this subjective position in mind that relates to a thought experience that I'm having as the subject in it, relating to it, somehow separate from it. I'm always pointing back to this subject. The subject is the felt sense of the thinker. And the thinker only exists, let's say, as an assumption in the thought. The assumption is that I am me, these are my thoughts, and I'm somehow observing them, separate from them, relating to them. And in that, the thinker hides itself as the subject, as where you're not going to look, because that subject looks out onto the objective thought narrative. Right, this is just a model. This is just a model, right? So I stress again, look into your experience, but don't look to confirm the model that I'm giving you. That's important, because you just miss it. That will become an objective thought, and then you'll be looking at that objective thought to confirm something from that subjective position. So this is what I would describe as the first big layer of thought, or level of thought, is this subject in mind that relates and strengthens its assumed reality by relating to an objective thought narrative. Everyone knows the thought narrative, everyone knows the self-referential talk in the mind, where we talk about my life, my practice, blah 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 blah, and it gets tiresome after a while. It gets uncomfortable after a while, and that's why we maybe turn to this inquiry, because it's after a certain point we intuit that there's something not right about that. There's something just not right about it. That's not all there is here, and it feels quite enclosed and limited and uncertain and restless, maybe. So we have that sense of the thinker. The sense of the thinker continues to prop up its own assumed reality through constantly relating to an objective thought narrative. And that can take the form of self-referential self-talk. So in the language that we use in the thought, directly references back towards a thinker. So I need to do this, my practice is going well, I need to wake up. When we look at this, what happens is this ghost, this self, this thinker, it's not actually there. And it thrives it thrives when it's not being paid attention to. It's ridiculous, like it's really ridiculous. But when you turn the attention back, so to speak, you'll find it reconfigures itself and hides somewhere else. Every time you look for it, it's not there. Then it pops up again, seemingly where you are, seemingly in the position of you. You're never going to objectively look at it. In a way, that does happen. In a way, but it's quite paradoxical. So it pisses off, it reconfigures, and then it will indirectly reinforce its own existence. So it will find another way. I'm giving it too much credit as something that's actually here and doing something, but it's a thought function. It finds another way to indirectly suggest its own resistance with more subtle ways of relating to, reacting to, referencing thought. So, for example, another more subtle layer would be um, referencing the objective experience, objective thought experience, as the witness in some way that's framed in objectivity, a way that's framed in subject-object experience. And it might not use directly reference the in its content directly reference the me, the thinker. So, for example, this experience is peaceful, or this experience is turbulent, um, or there's no self. It'll say there's no self, when there's some clarity, it'll go, oh, this is enlightenment, stuff like that. It's subtle, and it continues to reconfigure itself into more subtle framings to the point where it just stops and it's just not there in any real way. So a deeper level of thought would be, again, remember, this is just a model, this is just a pointing. It doesn't refer to anything objectively real. It's just use this to explore your experience. But a deeper level would be, it's kind of like the spatial framing, a spatial map, distance and objective and size and value, different objective values about the immediate physical experience. Like, what I am is here and I'm looking at a world over there. This camera is this size in relation to the rest of the room behind it. That door is this size and it's vertical, it's this colour, it's made of wood, blah 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 blah. And this is something that happens not at a level where you have to go around having a constantly running, some people might, like, verbal narrative about it. It recognises objective qualities from a subjective position about the environment immediately based on conditioning and memory. So I look at an object and I know, so there's a kettle. I know the kettle is like a teal colour. I recognise the shape, I recognise the distance, I recognise it's this far away from me, it's this size, so on and so on. All of that happens in it with this spatial map that's being overlaid onto experience, and what I usually refer to as an augmented version of reality in thought. When that's noticed, let's say, right, it gets hard to talk about now, but when that's noticed for what it is, there's then the option for it to not be there as the inherent way it is, the inherent way, what reality is in a real way. So then the objects lose their value, the point of view loses its inherent position, and then after that there's nothing you can say and think about this because it's so far beyond the realm of mind that it can't categorize it, and that's why it's freedom. You could maybe describe it and say that it's dimensionless, it's formless, it's spaceless, it's timeless, but it doesn't exclude any of those augmentations. But anything you can really say about it here is not right. And the rest of it is uncovering, so to speak, the subtle, more subtle and subtle ways in which we are framing experience in a way that any of it is understandable or knowable or in any way has separate parts to it in time and dimension and subjectivity, and value and so on. So the augmentation that I talk about is it's a different, it's a more fundamental and more subtle level of thought that seems to be what reality is in an objective way, and that's just the way it is when we're looking from that inherent viewpoint of an objective world. When we in some way occupy this assumption of a subject physically in space, when that falls away, you see that this is the entire universe, that this is everything, this is literally infinite. There are no dimensions, but it doesn't exclude what looks like dimensions. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen. But saying that I've seen it can suggest limitation. And everything becomes so close and so immediate that there's absolutely no time or distance at all. From the point of view of the mind, that only functions in subject-object, that's its limit. This is a paradox. It can't be comprehended whatsoever, because the thought appears as, let's say, an object within that. So it can't comprehend anything outside of itself, because it can't get outside of it to look at it. But that thought simultaneously is not separate from anything else. So it just gets more and more simple, and it's about being here, not looking for something else, not occupying a position inside reality, looking for something in it, looking for something in the experience as something separate from the experience, or looking at the experience as subject. Not about some more awake experience in the future, but about this. This is it. This is really it. It's right here. Just stop. That's the message. Stop. It's that simple. That's how simple it is. It's like laughably simple. That, you know, it's like, for me, when this clarified, right, so to speak, it was kind of like, why was I pretending that I didn't know this? Why was I moving away from this as if I could? Why was I looking for something else? Why? I was gonna end up where I'd never left anyway. Why not just stop? Maybe because there was some fun in it, there was some adventure in it, there was the illusion of a spiritual journey in it. There was still the suggestion that me, David's going to get something from this. It has implications relative to what I want in life. It doesn't. It's too simple for that. Anyway, that'll do for now. Good questions though. I'll talk to you next time.